The Nigerian High Court sitting in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, has declared all allegations of corruption, bribery and money laundering made against AITEO boss and international billionaire businessman Benedict Peters by British and Nigerian agencies arising from his ownership of a number of properties as baseless, as they were premised on trumped-up charges that constituted abuse of state power. The court therefore declared that African billionaire businessman Mr. Benedict Peters is a person of legitimate means and livelihood, and him and his related companies are the lawful owners of some properties wrongfully listed as owned by Mrs. Diezani Alison Madueke. In proceedings suit number FCT/HC/CV/0536/17 filed by Mr. Benedict Peters and three of its companies, Collingwood Limited, Rosewood Investment Limited, and Walworth Properties Limited, against the Attorney General of the Federation, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Crown Prosecution Services (CPS) of the United Kingdom, Helen Hughes of the CPS, the National Crime Agency of the United Kingdom, and its investigators Stacey Boniface and John Bavista. The court found that the defendants, by fraudulent design, suppressed and misrepresented facts in supposition that four properties, namely 270/17 Street Unit 4204 Atlanta, Georgia, Flat 5 Parkview, 83 to 86 Prince Albert Road, St. John Woods, London, Flat 58 Alley House, Melbourne, London, and Apartment 4-5 Erlington Road, London, were legitimately acquired by him, belonged to Mrs. Diezani Alison Madueke, former Minister of Petroleum in Nigeria, a fact they knew or ought to know as unsustainably true. In reaching the critical conclusions, the court found through evidence adduced, document and subsisting court judgment that Peters established proprietorship ownership of all the properties. The claimant had contended that the defendant engaged in a scheme of conspiracies, carousel fraud, misrepresentation and suppression of material fact, which occasioned hardship, grave damages, loss of earnings, loss of goodwill, and subjected the plaintiff to public contempt, odium and opprobrium. They further averred that the fraud committed by the defendant consists in dishonest, fraudulent and misrepresentation of the true ownership of the assets, in that they utilize a series of gross misstatements and concealment of fact as the basis upon which they obtained a succession of court orders in the form of interim forfeiture orders, following which they utilized the orders to support a request for mutual legal assistance that culminated in two restraint orders in the United Kingdom. The court found that these series of events continued even after representations were made about the true ownership of the properties, and this position affirmed by subsisting judgment of competent jurisdiction. In the judgment, the court observed that despite the subsistence of these judgments declaring the true ownership of the properties, the defendant continued to refuse to release the properties. The judge, Mr. Justice Olukayode Adeniyi, having heard and considered the witness and comment, the full submissions of counsel for the parties and the careful assessment of the evidence, concluded that the defendant's actions were directly intended, albeit to inflict economic loss on the just as much as it was unlawfully profited the defendants to extract by intimidation, coercion, the assets, properties and monies to which the claimants are legitimately entitled, finding that the acts of the defendants were targeted at misleading the court or misusing the legal process to injure the claimant's economic interest. He found that the existence of a common agreement between the parties was rightly inferred by the concerted act, and that those were purposeful, calculated and predetermined to achieve those outcomes. Justice Adeniyi made a number of declaratory and injunctive reliefs in favor of Mr. Benedict Peters and the other claimants, including an award of damages jointly and severally against the defendants. The judge declared that the defendants, British NCA, CPS, Mr. John Bavista, Helen Hughes, Stacey Boniface, and Nigerian Attorney General of the Federation, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, etc., by fraudulent design, suppressed and misrepresented facts about the ownership of the relevant properties, that the predominant purpose of the sham allegations was directly intended to cause the claimants economic loss, that the unlawful means of conspiracy of the defendant was to extract by intimidation and coercion properties to which the claimants were legitimately entitled. The judge therefore ordered the defendants, British NCA CPS Mr. John Bavista, Helen Hughes, Stacey Boniface, and Nigerian Attorney General of the Federation Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, their operatives, officers, agents, servants in whatever manner and howsoever called, be jointly or severally restrained from interfering with the proprietary rights and or interest of Mr. Benedict Peters and the other claimants, their agents, alter ego, or privies in relations to the properties listed in this suit. It further ordered the defendant either by themselves, jointly, severally, their operatives, officers, investigators, servants, agents, associates, and howsoever called, are hereby restrained from interfering, continued interference with the person of Mr. Peters, either by way of arrest, criminal indictment, charge, interdiction, extradition, or in any other manner, infringing on his personal liberty and freedom of movement in the facts and circumstances of this case. As to the quantum of economic loss, the court awarded general damages in the sum of 200 million naira jointly and severally against the defendants, to reflect in the judge's words, which said in court, "A peculiar case of misuse of state powers, oppression, and harass victimization through a tacit designed to undermine the economic interest of the claimants." End of quote. Counsel to the plaintiffs, Chief Mike Ozeko Mewa, reacting to the judgment, said that it had been a long 5 years for the claimants to clear their names, and that this judgment was a victory not only for the supremacy of rule of law, but a critical indictment of abuse of office, the arbitrary use of power, and ignominious prosecutorial and investigative fraud.